Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gamasutra Twitch channel. My name is Brian Francis, your unkempt host, down here in the bottom end of the screen. Above me in the clouds and the sky and the wonderful blue abyss that hangs over Los Angeles, are four special guests. But they're not special guests, are they? In fact, are they even
Not
special?
special.
Not
No.
special. No.
This is the least
These
special.
are my co-workers who respect deadlines. I'm joined by, in order, Chris Graft, Alex Walrow, Alyssa McAloon, Emma Kidwell. Unfortunately, Emma, we couldn't quite figure out the webcam situation today, so Emma is just here today embodying the spirit of good content.
Always.
Emma is one of our good content people. Anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Gamasutra Twitch channel. I will stop making terrible jokes and disrespecting my coworkers. Thank you all for joining us. We are here today to discuss a tragic event that has occurred. E3. Anyone?
It wasn't that tragic.
It wasn't tragic.
It was not any more tragic than previous E3s.
No. Well, pretty sure.
I heard you guys saw some video games. Were there any video
raise
games
your hand
there?
here
or-
if you went to E3. Emma's not raising her hand. Emma, I guess Emma looks like she's raising her hand, so she's trying to cheat there. No.
Through the magic of technology, you can experience
You can stream
E3.
E3. E3 can be watched from afar.
without the sunburn.
Or the
Yeah, so like
or the
real
BO.
quick, I know we have. Whoa.
Whose
Get somebody-
phone? Whose phone?
I know we have a lot to
Landline.
talk about.
Who still has a landline?
Okay. Anyway,
Sorry, we have a lot
Don't
to talk
judge me.
about.
I'm sorry.
Alex,
I
go
just
for it.
real quick, I do feel like I got everything out of E3, and I'm here in the Bay Area where it's beautiful and there's not a lot of people and it's comfortable and not 90 degrees. So my question to you, people who went to E3 and people who didn't go to E3, what value is there, if any, in people actually attending the show at this point?
You really wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, well, I always want to check in because I haven't been in 2
this
years.
is a question. This is a question as old as time. This is my 12th E3, but compared to my other colleagues who have a lot of them who have gone on to game industry stuff or other endeavors, that's barely any E3s. I think the person now who went this year, I think Brandon Sheffield, who is a contributor on Gamasutra, and a game developer, it's like his 20th or something. So yeah. Anyhow, it's that, like, what is like, is E3 worth it? Or like, even when I started, writing full time in 2005, there were op-eds where game journalists are asking, is E3 relevant? And I'm sure that I've written a couple of those, and then I
Let's Google
stopped
and
doing
find
it.
out.
Because it's like next gen's gone. It's because I think that, well, first of all, like we game journalists like to just do cliched stuff like that every year, and also it is also a legitimate question, especially with the way that the game industry has changed over the past decade. You have streaming now. Like, why am I waiting in line to go to the Microsoft press briefing and I'm melting? I'm watching my
And not
my
even
boss.
getting in. You didn't get in, right?
You're right. I'm watching my boss, his head getting redder and redder. but literally, we were standing in line at the Microsoft thing, and they were herding people around, and I missed it last year. So I wanted to go because I'm not as hardened cynic as I was a year ago, 2 years ago.
You'll be more hard
3 years
next
yeah.
year.
Yeah. No, but I kind of wanted to go this time. But the way that they had it all set up to get into the venue, it was really just it was a predicament. And there were other journalists who didn't get in. So I'm kind of digressing here because I'm trying to process. You can get a lot of the information, like the big announcements via streaming and stuff like that these days. Of course, everybody knows that. For a site like Gamasutra, and other consumer sites, for one, like I'm able to talk to more of the high level AAA people, and then it gives me a better idea of what are the trends in like the really big game publishers, like what's on their minds, because usually Gamasutra these days deals more closely with the nuts and bolts of game dev. So it's interesting to talk to those folks, and we do joke around and give E3 crap about stuff because it is a hard event to cover, and it's just crazy. I don't think that there's another event that will give you like a better idea of what the like the market, like the core quote unquote like console and PC video game markets want. I don't think you get like the same you don't get the same kind of big announcements around PAX even, for example. No. PAX is a lot more about bringing community and people together, and E3 is trying to be like that. It's not just doing a really ham-fisted job of that, but at least on site. But yeah, E3 is, it's about announcements again and revealing big games and things like that. So, long story short, I think we probably only have like 1 minute left in this thing. Now, my long-winded explanation. Yeah. It's it's a good thing to like get for me to get caught up on what is what the core market is doing and what people really want. Like Cyberpunk, I knew that people are excited about it. But for example, like CD Projekt just came with the gameplay, with the gameplay demo and things like that, and I didn't even expect it to it became like an E3 trend in itself. So anyway, moving on to Bryant, you actually got to see the Cyberpunk thing.
Yeah.
That's my segue off of me.
My segue. I saw Cyberpunk. There's a. I think this was a year. I think. My opinion of E3 goes up and down depending on how easy it is for me to score productive interviews, and thankfully, by riding the coattails of Chris Graft, I got some good interviews. My short answer for is E3 relevant? For press who do not like rely, we aren't hardcore video, and we aren't trying to have lots of video content that drives a lot of like our ad scheme. Like we aren't overly like on that end. Front and simple, plain and simple. If we can line up the interviews, this is a great place for us to like check in with developers and talk to some of them for the first time about their work. And I thought this year the ones I talked to were very thoughtful, very insightful, and very willing to be transparent about some of their game making process. I understand other outlets didn't have as much luck. There was a big kerfuffle about Ubisoft just trying to deadpan their way through an interview about The Division 2 and claim there's no political context to it. Chris, we lost your mic. I'll keep covering for Chris. So on the developer side, frankly, more than ever this year, what I heard was meetings. I heard about meetings on site. I heard about meetings off site. Publishers are still looking to sign games. Developers are looking to get their unannounced games in front of business people. I think the retail component, because American retail is dying, American retail is, or monopolizing at least. It's not like how it used to be about trying to get the games in front of every store shelf, but there's foreign press. I could go on for the reasons that E3 is relevant, but also like I understand when people can be frustrated about E3, because I am often frustrated about E3. But if just to answer your question, Alex, that's kind of where my head is. Real quick, distraction while Chris is still running around because there's probably a fire or something. Frag2 is asking, is what people want / what the core market is doing changing, or just more of the same? I can 100% say I think E3 is never more of the same, but the question is E3 is what you see at E3 indicative of something that is happening right now or something that was happening 2 years ago? I think is always a question worth answering. It doesn't sound like we have Chris back yet. Alyssa and Emma, you all actually covered a lot of more news coming out of the convention. I'm going to direct this one to you. What felt different this E3? What felt different about what people were interested in?
I wrote about Fortnite 5 times.
Nice.
It seemed like a lot of like the Battle Royale stuff was starting to bleed through from the trend of like that was just a thing that popped up last year, right? With
Right.
last March with PlayerUnknown. So like the AAA games are getting in on that. The PC gaming show had 3 battle royale games announced. One that was like 1,000 people, and I don't know. So there's definitely like some of that more recent stuff bleeding through. I don't know a lot of like the long-term trends, so I can't speak to that. But there were a couple like mobile announcements because mobile games are that big thing for a couple years now. And there were a couple of those in like Ubisoft. Somebody had one. I don't remember who it was. Had a couple of them, and everyone on Twitter was like talking shit about them. But the analysts are like, no, actually, this is what's going to make the money. These free-to-play mobile games that are now getting this stage time at the major conferences. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think if anything, that's not that like the trend there isn't. The trend isn't mobile games matter. It's publishers are giving times to mobile games at E3 because they're trying to let some of the hype bleed over. Emma, do you have anything to add?
There were a lot of shooters. That's like, a video game trademark, but I feel like that was really all that we saw, save for like a handful of games. There's a lot of that. More women, which is nice. Even though there's still like always room for improvement, but it was just nice kind of seeing that break up the standard. And then there was also the thing that I've been thinking about the most is just Ubisoft working with what's that platform called? Hit Record to kind of get people to help create assets, which is people are divided on that pretty much, but I think that stood out to me the most just because I can't remember an instance where that's kind of been a standard up until recently.
I'm going to shelve that for a minute because I want to get around robin on that one in just a moment. Chris Kraft, are you back yet? Blink once.
Am I?
Yes, you are.
Yay.
Yay, you can hear me. You can listen to my thoughts again.
Yes. Chris, I'm gonna just because you were there, I'm gonna let FragTube's question go to you. I just threw a pen across the room. Chris Kraft, is what people want / what the core market, is it changing or is it more of the same? What's your take?
Oh man, more of the same since when? So, I mean. Yeah, describe same. Like we're seeing a lot of sequels and things like that, but we're also seeing some new stuff. Like Remedy's Control got a lot of attention. There's some new stuff from Sony. There's of course Cyberpunk, things like that. So at the same time, people there are those new franchises that people are getting excited for, but people always enjoy the old the previous hits. You have like The Last of Us 2, what with its head cleaving and touching moments come smashed together. People want that also. So people just it's kind of, I guess you could say it's more of the same in that there's a whole lot of these are like the biggest, most expensive, highest production, highest profile games that we're going to be seeing here in the next year or so, and but at the same time, developers are mixing it up too. So does that not answer your question?
It's FragTube. I think just to close out FragTube's question, I think we can definitely say there were interesting new mechanics, better AI, quote unquote more realism. I saw developers pushing that. I heard other interesting things from developers. I think the framing, how developers think about what's new and how we think about what's new are often very different because they're the ones who get to look under the hood.
What I will say to add to that and maybe hopefully answer the question better, I did see some. I know that it's kind of a buzz term, but games as a platform, that kind of idea has been around for a really long time. However, it really seems like it's driving home now. Like all of these publishers, and I talked to the heads of a couple major publishers, they're talking about making real focus on making one game that people are just gonna play forever, and that's the one game that they play basically. I talked to for example, I went to a Ubisoft little meetup, and they talked about making the Division 2. And this stuff, the way that they made the first one, they gathered all of this data, the way that the players played, where the performance, for example, takes a hit on a certain map. They can gather all of this data, and then they're applying it to the next game. And they're also concentrating on metrics that are more subjective, like player sentiment was a big one. So they track player sentiment. It was when the Division first launched, for example, it was down at like 20-30% or something, but they were able to react to players through feedback, through metrics that they find through the game. And they find that better communication, regular updates to the game, and just a more open relationship, basically managing expectations for players, brought that all the way up to like 80%, like a few months after the launch. So the way that, on the surface, it might look like a lot of these games are more of the same, but at least for the games that are the games as platform type games, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes when you're talking about games like The Division, Destiny 2, and things like that. So that's interesting. It's like making live games and making games that are basically, hobbies for people.
Yeah. I think, and what's interesting, we talk about there being a lot of shooters this year. I was just looking over an interview, Brian, that you and I did with somebody from Epic, the user experience researcher on Fortnite.
Yeah.
And in part of our conversation there, he mentioned that players are becoming more sophisticated about the kind of games they play. So, for example, a couple of years ago, mobile shooters were thought to be really terrible and bad and like not real video games. And now there's a huge, mature adult market for them. I think at E3, what we see also is that like devs are getting better at building games. And so games are now not just shooters and not just RPGs. They haven't been for a long time, but more than ever, like Cyberpunk looks like a shooter that is also an open world, that is also like a Witcher-esque RPG, that is also like a driving game.
And it's also an immersive sim, kind of Deus Ex, like,
right.
If you have this skill, it'll help you move through this part of the level kind of thing.
Yeah, and like that is obviously a hypey demo. Who knows what the game will be like, but like that is the kind of stuff we are seeing, is games that can be built bigger, grander, more online. They can be supported in a live way from week to week and month to month, like Assassin's Creed and stuff. And I think that's kind of where we're going, is that shooting is such a popular verb that it's going to be the core foundation of a lot of games that go far beyond shooting as their primary like thing to do. I also think those giant worlds require a lot more time and assets to realize, which I think is why someone like Ubisoft might partner with a crowdsourcing platform like HitRecord to try and like not replace a creator, but like spice up a world with like little bits and pieces of fan created work.
I am ready to transition to that topic because I have a different take on it.
Hit me. What do you got?
That's why I didn't want us to get all our opinions out in another sec. Okay. Anyway, anyone else want to weigh in on what things are changing, how things are changing? No. All right. Anyway.
Well, give me a minute. So, like Emma said, so it's interesting. The whole, it felt like there were a lot of there's a lot of shootiness, and maybe that's because Xbox press conference and then Bethesda were early in the week, and they have franchises that are very much shooter type stuff. But it's kind of like in the last couple years, where now that you have this influx of big AAA games, that there's less of a focus on the more diverse selection of independently developed titles that would kind of fill out the library around these bigger AAA games. So I don't know if it was just Emma's noticing it, so maybe it's but it did feel like there was more of a focus on the games with heavy shooter gameplay. That could just be my imagination because it is a staple, but it's kind of like it just seemed like it was there was more shootiness. I have that in my notes. I have in my notes things to talk about. Shooty ? So yeah, I'm not really sure. And also, as far as diversity goes, I'm noticing that it was refreshing to talk to Patrick Soderlund, who not too long ago was promoted a chief design officer, CDO, of Electronic Arts. And I think that they're just like, these folks are just done. You know, the whole Battlefield 5 thing with the featuring women, and then all this stuff about quote unquote historical accuracy, which certainly isn't just thinly veiled sexism. But like, I think they're just done now. Like he just told me, like, you know, if these people don't know what they're talking about, and they need to just deal with it. And like the current, if you're doing business and entertainment, whether it's movies or games, I mean, it's obvious right now that like gender diversity and representation is important. It's what the mainstream is looking for. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting to hear these CEOs or chief level people just being over it. And then just talking to press, you know, it's kind of like, well, finally, you're speaking up about this. But it's better late than never, I suppose.
Feels like maybe 2 years from now we'll have an E3 stage show where it's like, "Oh man, babies, please leave the auditorium."
We are all SJWs now. I'll just go on the record and say that was an insincere use of SJW. That word is garbage. I'll just need to clarify my joke. I want to keep pulling everyone's thoughts. So let's round robin on Hit Record, Ubisoft, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I've had to shut down 2 people for it, so I really apologize. Emma, I invite you first because you have been passionate about this all week in our own Slack channel. Walk me through your reaction and just a quick briefer. On stage, Ubisoft announced that for Beyond Good and Evil 2, they'd be partnering with Hit Record to create art and music assets for the game on their website. They confirmed that a $50,000 pool would be available for people whose artwork gets used, whose creations get used in the game. And this, Joseph Gordon-Levitt did post a follow-up blog yesterday, I think, that talked more about like the need to clearly identify people with certain roles on projects and making sure they're fairly compensated. That was kind of the new addition from that. Ubisoft has kind of been mum about it since they announced it. I think they're letting poor JGL, poor Robin, poor 500 Days of Summer Man take the heat because it's his organization. Emma, go for it. What is your reaction? Give me your take.
Well, I think people should get paid. Always. And I know that he mentioned in his blog post that it's unrealistic to pay everybody who wants to contribute, which is fair. But also, I think that if you're using, hey, fans of Beyond Good and Evil 2 should work on this, I think it's almost a little manipulative, even though I honestly believe Joseph Gordon-Levitt has good intentions with it, but just doesn't understand the kind of grunt and contract and freelance work a lot of developers go through. So I think the intentions are good, but, not really understanding, how do I know if my work's going to be put in the game? How are the funds going to be split? And I think over the past few days, they've clarified that on certain points, but we still, based off of what I've researched, I don't think there's a clear vetting process. It's clearly not a contest because it's being pushed as more of a...
They said it on stage. This is not a contest. This
isn't a contest, but it's more like it's a bunch of collaborators building on top of each other's work. But then I think that just, muddles up how you're going to get credit, how everyone's going to get paid, because they put aside in their budget, I think it was $50,000, I want to say, and then that's it. And I know that if your work is used more, you get paid more, and there's no guarantee that anyone gets paid. It just kind of depends on who decides what is worthy. And I don't know that I like that very much, but I do think that they had good intentions. It's just not a good way to execute asking for assets when I think a big company should, be able to pay for what they're asking for.
Alyssa, can I jump to you next just because I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk? Alyssa, any reactions?
For the contest thing, it's hard to say, like, be on stage and be like, it's not a contest, we're just only going to pay people. Everyone contributes work, and then the stuff that gets used gets paid. And that kind of just, like, reads like you're competing against other artists to decide who gets a chunk of that pie. Because everyone's only getting the $50K that Hit Record put up is being split among every creator that contributes based on how much work they put into it. So it's, I don't know, it's just muddy. I feel like it would have been better received if Ubisoft were putting in additional money on top of that, or if there were just more for that. I don't know. One of the other criticisms I've seen is that people are like, oh, well, you could be paying someone at Ubisoft, you could hire the composers to do this because they're looking for, like, art to add into the game for, like, posters and stuff like that, but they also are looking for, like, radio or songs to play on in-game radios and announcements on in-game radios. So there's a lot of, like, voice acting, music, writing, art, graphic design, all of these different things beyond just, like, fan contributions that are like, well, these are actual professionals who, if they have the skills to do this for this fan project, it's likely they have the skills to do it professionally. So having them contribute as a fan rather than a professional is kind of demeaning in a way to the work that they do, I would say. But
I think this whole thing is so interesting. I agree with you both, and I think with most people that it could have been handled better at the rollout. Like I think Ubisoft kind of hung Hit Record out to dry by not getting on top of this more quickly, and maybe like taking off the gate on how much money they're going to pay out, or being more clear about that. But it does seem like something that was done in relative good faith, or at least I could believe it was. And I think it's so interesting if we think about, like, when you look at Kickstarter, that's a platform where people give money. They give money to developers. They literally just give their time in money form to developers to make a video game, and in return they get a copy of the game or
Plus
some
rewards.
other junk. And, like, would this be different if instead of giving them money for their contributions, they gave them a copy of the game? Or would that just be a different way of looking at crowdfunding? Like, I think
That was some galaxy brain shit right there.
I think Ubisoft should be doing what Levitt is doing. Like, I think it's a good look to be listening to people. I think it's good to be having this conversation about labor and about like what it means to spec work versus like actual meaningful remunerative work. Remunerative. Sorry, it's early in the morning over here. But I don't necessarily think it's pure evil. I think it's a really interesting way of talking about this, and I don't know. I wish Ubisoft had been more upfront about it and been more open about talking about it. And I think that's a really bad look for that company.
I'm just going to point out his name is Gordon Levitt. His last name is Gordon Levitt. Chris,
It's just JGL.
JGL.
Yeah.
Chris, I hear he's your new friend, Chris. I hear
I
you
just
hung
call
out
him
with
Joe.
him
Yeah.
at
I
Ubisoft.
Yeah, I saw him show up. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to ask him if he's supposed to be Robin at the end of The Dark Knight. Or which one was it?
Dark Knight Rises.
It's my bad movie joke. Anyway,
Inception.
he's got a great smile. Certainly he can't be evil. So, no, but I think one of the key things is what Alyssa hit on, in that I think that they made this and they announced it like thinking so much that this is going to be a fan contributed thing. Like, this is a good opportunity for the fans, and that's cool. But they didn't think that, what about, professionals or people with skills that are professional, people who are actually putting time in this stuff. Maybe they look at it as just like whipping up a quick baseline, like Ed in his basement is just like laying down a track or two and then uploading it to Hit Record. So I think that the whole thing is meant to be just for hobbyists, and that wasn't, in the messaging enough. And even if it was in the messaging, I don't know how you say that.
Like, professionals need not apply is such a weird thing.
Yeah, and like, and it's so it completely turns out to be like probably 99%. It's probably 99% spec work. Like that's the only way that you can really describe it, like making something without getting paid, but you might get paid. That's the definition of it. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of just a flawed model, and I don't know how you explain your way out of it. Sorry, JGL.
I'm going to jump in with my take, and then we'll hopefully have time for any building on other people's thoughts. But then I
have one small more thing to add after you're done with yours.
Sure thing.
Okay.
I will let you get to it. I'm going. I was trying to mull about this through my head all week because, like the glorious JGL, I was trying to listen to everyone talking. What I would like to point out is that from Ubisoft's end, I was trying to put myself in Ubisoft's point of view. They are thinking about this, I'm sure, from a marketing standpoint, because what they have is they have a new game based on a franchise that has a fan base, but not for the kind of game they're making. They made a third-person platformer way back in the 2000s. It became a cult hit. It turned out they were passionate about it, and now they are making a nearly No Man's Sky level space game with exploration and ships that go into other ships. That's big, that's expensive, and I'm sure they're trying to make sure people are there to kind of advocate for it to other people when they move into the bigger PR stages. I think a lot of developers for a while have been trying to figure out how to integrate their communities more with their games. They've, you go to BlizzCon and you see fan art contests, and the work's as good as professional. Like Blizzard's own employees will cosplay. Like they had a Widowmaker cosplay out there the day Overwatch was announced. So like, what happens when your own employees are kind of fans of your own games or other people's games, and they're doing that kind of thing? I think it can't be overstated that, like, I'm sure every developer out there, if they could take fan art and legally work it into their game as fast as possible, I'm sure they would, because that's a good way to reward your audience, the people who are buying your game, playing your game, telling you how much they love their game, and hopefully if they do it more, that will help you stay in business, etc. So from Ubisoft's end, this 100%, Alex, earlier you were kind of implying that like they might need to reach out to fill out this universe with those assets, but I only don't agree with that, and I don't think Ubisoft would have willingly gone up there on stage and said, this project is too big, we couldn't possibly handle it, we're teaming up with Hit Record to fill our game up. Like, they 100% could.
You're right. No, and I want to back that up. You're right, I did imply that, and I didn't mean it. I don't think anyone at Ubisoft is relying on Hit Record as a meaningful way as part of their production pipeline. I think maybe a couple of years down the line, once companies have more opportunities to work with platforms like this, that could be a real concern. But this just seems like a genuine marketing effort.
I think 100% my realist concern walking away. Not that I don't think the spec labor. I think the spec labor concerns are real. I think I agree with Alex in that JGL has done his best to at least not be silent about it. Like they didn't even mention the pay on stage first thing, and he jumped on Twitter and was like, 100%, we screwed that up. Here's the pay details. But I'm going to point out, like, it doesn't take much of a bad faith read or a bad faith actor to look at what they're doing, and if they get away with it, to say, hey, sweet, now we can just take fan labor and get it into our game, because not other companies have as many other employees as Ubisoft does. I keep calling them Ubisoft, but it's Ubisoft. Ubisoft relies on, we talked to one of their producers about this a while back, like, it relies on the fact that they can onboard a lot of developers really quickly from one of their studios to help out with a game project. So that means we can only look at it from their perspective as a marketing challenge, that they are now probably going like, oh god, this isn't what we expected, like, is this going to be worth it? We're going to have to deal with this PR mess through the rest of production. But other game developers are probably looking at it and go, if they can get away with it, can we? And like, I have a lot of good faith in game developers, but it's not a giant leap, like, in a kind of scary way in some ways. Alyssa, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to mention that I'm very happy that, like, when the second this was announced on screen, my, like, chaos of a Twitter feed became, like, people being like, well, these people are going to get paid, right? It was all people asking about compensation and being like, free work's not okay.
Developers so just and the press alike, I think.
Yeah. Developers, press, and even, like, just some people who aren't in the industry at all, just, like, people who know the value of creative work. And it's really, no matter what comes of this, if Ubisoft makes a statement or not, it's just good that people are having this conversation, and that was the first reaction, is kind of like uplifting in a way. So
Anyone else want to throw anything in on poor JGL and our friends at Ubisoft?
Yeah, the pronunciation of Ubisoft. There's like,
Get into it.
I asked. Okay, I'm totally going off topic here, but like
That's fine.
one of the there was a French guy at Ubisoft, and I said it's like so. I was talking to him. So the correct way it's Ubisoft, right? That's what I heard. And then he was just like, no, it's like just this French. It's like it's almost like he said you can't pronounce it unless you are French.
Yeah, because I think technically there's like it's not just you, it's just American.
It's kind of smashed. It's like Ubisoft and Ubisoft smashed together.
Ubisoft.
It's like Ubisoft.
It's like if you write the same word over and over and over again, it stops looking like a word. That's like where I am with Ubisoft right now.
Yeah, this is the art and business of trying to of Ubisoft.
We are wordsmiths, so it's our job to break this kind of stuff down.
I just always say ubiquitous software, and then everyone just leaves me alone.
Get out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on. Our next talking point. Let's really quick. We've already talked about what devs get out of E3. We've kind of talked about the announcements. Chris, or everyone has done some kind of coverage on E3 in some way. Chris, in one word, we kind of asked this earlier about like trends or whatever. Chris, in your interviews, is there anything else you kind of that people should be going to read our E3 coverage, obviously? But what do you why do you think what did you get out of your interviews that you thought was really important alongside the diversity thing you mentioned earlier?
It's supposed to be one word.
I also one quick statement. Also,
Games.
I should not have said the diversity thing. I meant Patrick Soderlund's comments about putting women in Battlefield 5. That is not the right way to describe that. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Okay. What else? When I was out there, it's been talked about. It's not directly related to games, but the event itself. It's a weird thing now because there's more, there's more of the public in. It felt like this year, and then on top of that, the security kind of made it feel like luckily with media you don't have to wait in as long a line, but they're pretty dang thorough, which that's just how it is now. So yeah, security and stuff is kind of like once you get in there, you feel like you just have to stay in there and just do everything that you can. Another thing, I don't want to steal from anyone's moment because I know that I'm sure the Last of Us 2 is going to be great and stuff, but it definitely felt like. I don't know the market. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It was weird standing in a room. It was weird when I was standing in a room again, and this happens like almost every E3, but it was just especially weird with this moment when we're all standing in the room watching the Last of Us trailer, and then like you have this touching moment between two people, and then it goes over to like meanwhile, or like she's thinking like about this like head cleaving, like stabbing. I mean, it was pretty sick. When I know that when she very earnestly cleaved the desperate man's head off, which took a couple hacks, it was just weird. Like to me, it just seemed like, you could just see that there must be somebody there that's like the gameplay person and the combat person, and then the person who wants to tell the soulful narrative person. And there, it's the classic ludonarrative dissonance thing, and it is just marketing material. Like I'm sure that once you put it all together in the game, it all fits much better than that. But it was just weird, like. Nice little dance, and then you get the kiss, and then like people are cheering. You have like same-sex couple kiss, and it's like all right, like but did not get quite as much of the hooping and hollering as when she cleaved the dude's head off, and then which is I think people are rooting for her, but it got a little Roman Coliseum for me.
I mean, this is exactly what happened what, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when they showed the trailer for the first game. It was exactly this, where they shotgunned some dude's head off right at the end of the trailer, and that whole Coliseum just went nuts, and it was disgusting. It was the most I felt ashamed to be in that building, and I felt ashamed to be a human being, and I knew it wasn't because the people were cheering, although they were cheering not because they would cheer normally, but because the trailer was structured and orchestrated in a way with the music cues and the light cues and everything to make you want to have a crescendo of emotion there. And so it's either like ugh, or it's some weird whooping cheer. And a lot of people in the crowd are employed by that company, so they're not going to like make a big loud sound and go, oh, gross, disgusting. They're going to fucking go, yeah, this is great. And it's just the most disgusting way of using marketing that I've ever seen at E3. Which says something about how little I've been going, because I've heard it's way worse 5 or 10 years ago. But
no, I think that it's coming back up. Like I just kind of noticed, when the big AAA developers are 100%, back on the scene, then you're going to have more stuff like that. But yeah, not to again, I feel a little bad about saying that, because I know that it's still somebody's work, but I'm just saying what I felt when I was in there was like, whoa.
Alyssa and Emma, do you want to throw anything in?
Re Last of Us, like, I don't understand why hyperviolence is like the way they're going with all their marketing for that. Like, yeah, it gets the dude bros to cheer, but like, when I think of like the first Last of Us game, it's like character-driven stories and like this whole like evolution of Joel from the beginning to the end of the game, and like that moment where you come out and you see the giraffe there and the ruins of the city, and like that's what I think about. And then like this one has like this touching moment at the beginning. I'm like, yes, maybe it won't be like last year's trailer where they had people hanging from the tree being gutted, and then like just like that, they're like, nope, here's a knife in someone's neck. Yeah, my friend was like we were watching it in a Discord group together. And my friend was a couple seconds ahead of me, so there was like this very nice kiss going on, and then all these like, oh my god, I'm like, what the and then it was all downhill from there. But it's just a weird way to present a game that has so much to offer, and then just to see that that's the kind of hill they're bringing it to die on, and it's going to sell well because it's a gorgeous game with a lot of violence and whatever, but like, I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt,
no,
but like, I do think that, over the course, like, I would think there'll be more context. It's just like the marketing for me, like it's like I'm basically 100% agreeing with you, but hopefully, like I'm sure in the whole game, like it won't be as abrupt. Maybe, I don't know. I
mean, but they got criticisms last year for the trailer that was just like there were the hot takes everywhere being like, this is just senseless violence being used, contextless violence used to advertise a game, and then this year, like I see less of that, but it's more violence and even barely any context. So
yeah.
I guess I'm going to piggyback off of all this Last of Us talk too, just because I could watch the guy hanging from a tree getting gutted, but I couldn't watch Norman Reedus' character in Death Stranding rip off his toenail. I had to look away from that. But going back to The Last of Us, I think what made like marketing is like you're supposed to, make people want to play your game. So having this trailer kind of take away what the first game is about, which is you have context for the violence and it's being used to make you feel like a shitty person. Like throughout the game, you're not supposed to feel good about what you're doing. And it's and you play that knowing full well that like it's doing the job. And then when you watch the trailer, it's still violence taken out of context, because I think it has a place in the game, but watching that marketing, you don't understand it. It's just, here's two nice gals kissing, but then here's this nice lady chopping off this man's head. Anyway, and then it just goes back, and I feel like it's just really confusing. And I guess since I couldn't watch it in the Coliseum of bros and only had Twitter to look at, it's just a lot of people seem to be kind of echoing the same thing, where it's like it feels out of place, even though this is a game known for its its violence. It just felt strange.
Yeah, it was, and that's all that it was. I mean, it was the abruptness. Like, people listening to this probably like, oh, Chris Graft, like, he really likes to poop on people's parade. He doesn't like violence and stuff. It's like,
Chris Graft loves Doom.
I like violence in media. I'm totally fine with it. It's the way that it's used sometimes just to shock. Is a little annoying. Like, for example, like I could go through the entire Bethesda conference. Like, those are like some of my favorite games, and almost every single one of them, like extremely. Oh, I love Prey so much. Yeah, it's like Doom. You're like you're running up to a monster and just like ripping it. But that's all you're doing. That's all you're doing. There's there's no. I don't know. I'm not saying that things shouldn't have like hills and valleys and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the marketing works since we've been talking about it for like 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
They got us.
I actually don't have anything to add on The Last of Us. Because y'all said things that I was thinking, and I got one sentence, which is it's real heckin' nice that a large company is willing to open its conference with actually showing a like same-sex couple instead of other stuff. Like, Sony won style points for that. That's partly where my head is. Like, that's not something that would have happened before, and in the context of like things that happen to like gay people in this country, like, that's a heck of a lot better than other things.
They can blow people's heads off just as good as a hetero.
Moving on. Do you know who we've not talked about? Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
I guess so we're gonna talk about today. Smash for 45 minutes.
Now we talk about. I have a Waluigi amiibo back here I want to grab because he's the poor boy who got left out. He got shafted.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but like seriously, like then we have to talk about Nintendo because the Nintendo Switch still a big deal. Lots of people making games for Nintendo Switch. Bethesda was like, relationship ended with Sony. Nintendo is best friend now, or kind of. They're still making games for the PS4, but like like. Where do like, it's weird. I did see a headline that Nintendo's stock shares dropped because they always freaking do after these announcements. I don't know what analysts want, or investors want, or whatever. Like, they said their stock shares dropped after that direct presentation. Although people like me and Flipsider were like, new Fire Emblem. I was very excited about new Fire Emblem. But seriously, Emma, you're the first on my Nintendo question list. What do you have any reactions to what Nintendo did, and do you think game developers should be paying close attention to anything from that Smash-filled direct?
Honestly, no. I for some reason when I was watching Nintendo's conference, other than being upset again that there's no Animal Crossing, and upset that put Waluigi in the game, you cowards, not just as an assist trophy. Give them. Not everyone is in the game. We need to recognize that. But I don't know. I think it's good to pay attention to Nintendo for all of the like indies who are going to publish their games on the Switch. That's really the only thing I was kind of keeping an eye out for. I don't know. I thought that reading off every single Smash character for maybe half an hour wasn't the best way to use your time, because you had the announcements for everything else, and then here's Pikachu, but then there's also girl Pikachu, and then here's can you tell the subtle differences in the voice acting? And it felt really strange this year. I don't know.
It was strange.
I loved
I guess
but no,
I really wanted to pay attention to the indies, but and the Switch, because I'm still I feel like the few people who is holding out on a Switch until I get Animal Crossing, but I guess it's never going to happen, so I really need to start paying attention to more of what kind of indie stuff is going to be put on there in the future.
Melissa, go. Anything you want to add besides no Animal Crossing? I know you were very sad about that.
Yeah, no, I was. There was this moment, like, about halfway through all of their Smash Brothers stuff where everyone collectively realized that they weren't going to talk about anything else, and there was just this, like, the mood dropped for everybody but diehard Smash fans who were, like, raging. But I was trying to look this up because my memory's very bad, but I feel like last year they talked a lot more about the Switch's indie plans and like, here's all the developers we have supported on the Switch.
Yeah.
And just and given the Switch was kind of like relatively new at that point in time, so it's to be expected. But like this year they didn't, aside from like the quick little.
They did like a Nindies trailer.
A
Yeah.
sizzle reel. I believe the
yeah.
trailer
Yeah.
was a sizzle reel.
Like, I don't remember it because I wasn't actively looking at the screen the entire time, and they weren't, like, talking about much. They're just like, here's this, and then now half-hour Smash. But, like, it just felt like their focus was really different this time around.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know why I always say read like I'm responding to an email, but, in regards to the, analysts and everything with the stocks dropping, a lot of them were, from the things that I read, it was saying that because they feel like Nintendo is going to lose the casual Switch market, which is where they need to go to get that like 25 million lifetime that they want to sell for the Switch.
That Wii number or whatever. That's a good
Which
point.
is weird because in their like Q&As, they're always talking about, well, we want the Switch to be like a multi-console per household device, and to do that we're going to have to focus on the non-gamers and stuff like that. And then they do this E3 showing that is like exclusively geared to these hardcore fans, so it's this really like kind of tonal disconnect between what their executives are saying and then what they're actually showing.
I'm going to point out there's actually one thing. I mean, it's weird when they talk about like it being a multi-console household. They dropped one thing in there that I think developers should pay attention to, which is that it seems like the Switch Mario Party either takes advantage of or will be taking advantage of some technology that lets two Switch monitors sort of detect each other's proximity, so that you can, in this case, it was just such a simple gameplay interaction, which is things moving from one Switch to another. But that's one of those little things that would incentivize a house to get, multiple Switches, or like in the same way that Pokemon Red and Blue once got houses to get multiple Game Boys, or at least multiple copies of the game. That stood out to me, that Nintendo just casually dropped this piece of technology that developers probably wanted to know about, especially if they're making multiplayer games. They're like, wait, you can do that? Like, in the middle of a direct? That's not a complaint per se. Nintendo just sort of seems... We always see Nintendo marches to the beat of its own drum, and but I just wanted to highlight that because even though Nintendo did a very smashy presentation, they still seem to be aware of it. They seem to know that we're thinking about these things. They seem to know that people want Animal Crossing. They're looking at each other and then they're looking at us, and we're all just kind of standing around the room quietly while Mario and Samus fight in the background.
So they dived into that. Oh, sorry.
No. I had a very important thing to say.
Okay.
Which
Very
what if you were able to like put, I don't know, like 90 switches, like mount them on a wall.
100 switches parachute.
Yeah. And you could just play like a really giant version of like Puyo Puyo Tetris or something.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So Nintendo did dive into that thing with the two Switch things later in their Treehouse showing, which they from the second they do the Direct, they do Treehouse throughout the rest of E3, like nonstop, and they do a bunch of announcements there, but nobody's watching it because there's so much else going on. So like, it's just Nintendo's weird about their E3 stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what you said about the disconnect between the audience. I mean, E3 is like, it's a hardcore audience. So maybe that's why they decided to do deep dive into the mechanics of Ryu's jump and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of probably really exciting for some people that are really excited about Smash. That's my analysis.
Yeah.
I think we're coming towards the... Let me check my timer. Are we coming towards the end of our hour? I actually don't have any kind of clock running. It's just kind of... Chris Craft was a little late, so we... I think we've got about 15 minutes left is where I'm really getting at with my lamenting of Christian Graft.
Well, then we should talk about what E3 2018 means for game developers, because that's what we think about all day. And I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah.
Do we want to let each person get one answer into that in the format Chris Graff requested?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Is there a format? my answer is not much, so that's just going to be my answer. It's not that it matches the format or not. But it's every year a more public-facing show. And that's an interesting switch, and I think it's a switch that the ESA needs to do to make that business viable. But, now it seems like a badly organized PAX in LA. And so I think devs probably get out of E3 mostly what they get out of a good PAX, but not quite. It's obvious, like, Nintendo didn't make a big show of indies, really. I mean, you guys can tell me better, but I don't think there was a huge indie presence on the floor. I mean, Indiecade was there, and all the publishers, Devolver and stuff were around, but I didn't get the sense that there were a lot of indies front and center at Sony's area or at Microsoft's area for whatever it was. So I think it's hard to see what developers get out of E3 when the big companies don't need them. And it seems like right now they don't need them as badly as they used to.
Alyssa, you're next. What does E3 2018 mean for game developers?
So like E3 going into last year, they introduced the gamer badge, the consumer badge, and then this year they are kind of adapting and correcting from the mistakes they learned. But it still feels like, as someone watching everyone complain about Twitter on it, it still feels like they're coming into their own and trying to figure out where they are as like this part trade show, part consumer fest. And I know I think someone mentioned a tweet where someone had talked about they were trying to get into the conference, and because of the badge type they had, they couldn't bring a backpack of a certain size in, and all their pitch materials were in there so they could talk to some publisher about the game they're trying to pitch. So it's this point where like actively not knowing what kind of convention or event they are 100% is kind of interfering with the business side of it, and then complicating things for like the consumer badges. Spent like hours outside trying to get in because the line system wasn't organized. So it just seems like it's gotten into this really weird muddled ground where it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it's not doing either thing 100% well for developers or for the gamer passers. So that's my hot take.
Emma, what's your thought?
I don't know that, at least based off of what I've seen, I don't know that there's like why developers, like smaller developers, would want or even need to go to E3. I guess for pitching, but like the only memorable thing based on just watching streams from home, because I don't have the added benefit of going on the show floor, because I'm sure that's where they really have the only opportunity to shine there, because other than like Nintendo showing like a slide reel of here are some of the indies, or maybe like a vague trailer. I just remember Microsoft talking about their acquisitions for like the bigger, how do we reference them? Like Big Eye or something, when like an indie studio, Triple I, yeah. A Big Eye. I don't know, it feels like there's really no point, and I'm probably just talking like out of my ass here, but I don't know. I don't think
we all are.
Farting noises.
I think Alyssa though like just made a really good point about, it's just I don't think that they know what they're doing yet, really, like for the smaller guys, and it's more just like still kind of a AAA studio stomping ground, based at least for like people watching at home.
Christian Graft.
Yeah, I mean, what Emma said, that's what it is. It's E3 is the ESA. ESA is made up of all these major publishers, so they have to serve their members, and it's too big. So they're I'll be nicer to E3 than I have been in the past. Like, game developers, like, they don't get like hard takeaways, like they do if they go to something like Game Developers Conference. They don't have
we are affiliated with disclosure.
Yeah. But it's the best conference, so it wouldn't matter. However, like, people are definitely. Just because you have a critical mass of fellow game developers there, and for AAA teams, like there's more of them. It feels like than GDC, like hanging out at the bar. Then there's just an entire it looks like a third of the Respawn team, hanging out there. It definitely does bring people together, and it does inspire people like game developers. I've seen a lot of developers on Twitter and ones who I've talked to just say, like, they're psyched up after E3. I mean, they went out there like this thing that they've been working on, for a long time. It finally gets out there, and people can watch it or watch more of it. So people like us can complain about it. But overall though, like it's that's what I think game developers get out of E3. They get inspired. I mean, can you imagine at CD Projekt, like after releasing Cyberpunk, whether you're in marketing or, you're a programmer on that game, and releasing that and seeing the just straight up explosive reaction to this. So that's one thing, game developers can and did get out of it. Also, the same with me. Like, if you're somebody who pays attention to more of like the business side or things like that, just kind of getting lifting your head away from your desk and then going out and then seeing everything together, and it's kind of one of the few times a year that you can get a real cohesive look at what the video game market is right now. So I feel more informed on that front. And got to see someone rip their toenail off. Mm-hmm. I don't know what game devs took away from that. But yeah, I think it's loud, it's crass. It's all those things that it always has been. But we also keep going to it, and that there are good things that come out of it. Even with small game developers, let me just make one last point. With small game developers, they might not buy a pass, but I've seen a couple of them that were able to either being highlighted at the Microsoft conference or Sony or Nintendo. That's huge for an indie developer, and that's a big exciting thing. And there's so many people around there too. You walk around the convention center, one of the hotels or one of the coffee shops, show somebody, bring out your laptop, have people check out, the latest build of your game, and that's worthwhile too. So there's it's loud and bonkers, but there's a reason people keep on going into it, and I'd rather it exist than not.
My take from back here, from back in good old LA, I'm the only person still trapped here in this hot hellhole. It's cooling off this weekend, thank God. Thank the gods. E3 has been and might yet still be a place to get a lot of eyes on your game, whether it's the eyes you need to help sell your game to a publisher or get development funding, or it's selling it to the public in the press conferences or in the PC Gamer show. I think every company sort of is trying to figure out their angle and what's the best way to make sure our game gets the best coverage. Whatever Remedy in 505 did to get Control into the PlayStation conference to be one of the 4 games featured on this hour-long stream must have been a big deal. That game Satisfactory did to get its PC Gamer placement. That's from Coffee Stain Studios. Whatever they did is probably going to help make sure that Satisfactory sells a lot of copies. That's kind of... I say that with the... For better and for worse, small devs are obviously going to feel a little shafted unless they are one of the small devs who can get that sweet primo placement. Large devs are going to feel like they got a lot out of it, unless they're one of the large developers who sort of shows up with a game that doesn't catch the world on fire, and they spend a lot of money on booth space, and then suddenly realize that they're not getting the attach rate that they need to actually sell this game, or something, whatever you say, attach rate, whatever. I don't know what the technical term is. Most of all, I think for going a little bit, I'm sort of starting at one place and moving my thoughts outward. It is really cool that I felt like more developers this year were willing to talk about the benefits of having diverse cast of characters, about having diverse employees, about improving conditions for the game industry. The show itself still kind of, I think, has a behavior problem where if you're at the show, I just keep hearing lots of reports of bad behavior in a way I don't hear about at other shows, which sucks. In the tradition of my Jewish grandfather, who liked to say, on the one hand and on the other hand, quoting Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, I will just, on the one hand and the other hand, my way around E3 until I am dust and just bones in the dirt, and E3 is still going. That's my hot take.
You need to drop your mic and take your mic off and just drop it.
I gotta unscrew it and throw it across the room like I did that pen earlier. With that, is everyone good? Has everyone got their E3 trailers out? I got 2 more features myself to run. I gotta finish those at some point. Anyone else got any E3 takes they need to poop out?
Yeah, E3 sucks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the devs that have to go there and to deal with the hassle and the bustle, and then just hopefully when your game comes out, it doesn't get buried or totally forgotten. E3 seems less relevant now than ever.
Oh, I guess I'll throw one take out. I think if anything, E3, watching trailers at E3 and watching reactions to trailers at E3, depth and the anticipation of depth is selling a lot more than polished, refined, levelly things, I think. I think the audience reactions to lots of things at E3 make clear they want the idea, potential is a big deal, and games with lots of systemic depth or content depth have a lot of potential. I think a lot of developers were trying to sell their games that way, and I feel bad for a couple of indies that made it into the PC Gamer Show because I feel like they may not be able to meet that promise, and therefore they may struggle more when they hit market.
I don't think that E3 really has much bearing on what happens in the market. I think it's more about what I think it's just more. I don't know. I don't think that because necessarily your game was featured in a trailer, or that you even have a segment dedicated to it, that it can bring sell more copies directly or indirectly than a really good trailer released just on the internet would. But I guess my point is was really nonetheless that's still exciting and inspirational for developers who are there, who are working on stuff, who finally get a stage for something, whether or not that moves any units in the end. I don't know if that really makes a difference. I don't know if it makes it. Yeah, you can even see EA Play did its own thing all the way down in Hollywood. They weren't, they were 20 minutes away from the convention center. It's kind of they're going to market to their community the way that they're going to do it. I'm not sure going to E3 itself is really going to make that much of a difference, but what do I know?
All right. Unless your time to drop last thoughts in is now, as I prepare the closing ceremonies. As thank you all for watching the Gamasutra Twitch channel as E3 week comes to an end. Thank you for watching our haggard, uncertain, and wishy-washy takes. Thank you as always for sticking with us as we talk about the art and business of making games. We are always trying to bring you interesting conversations with cool developers who are doing good work in the field of video games. Then we feel that if you like those conversations, you should hit the follow button on this Twitch channel so that you can get more of them. And on top of that, you should also read Gamasutra.com, where Chris Graff will be running some fancy highfalutin interviews. I will be running some fancy highfalutin interviews. They've sort of run this week in some form, but I've got more running next week. Alyssa McAloon and Emma Kidwell do amazing news work. And Alex is now...
We're just going right down the list.
And he who wrangles our wonderful originals that show up in that front page slot. Y'all should read it. Y'all should watch us. Y'all should just hang out and think about what video games means for the people who make them and think critically about them. And with that, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. More kisses, less smashed dishes. I don't know.